Good morning. Welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church West. Welcome to you and to your joy, your hope, your pride. Welcome to you and your grief, your fear, and your anger too. We welcome you for all of who you are and hope you will enjoy being here today. My name is Steve Frey, and as a member of the worship ministry team, I'm glad to be here leading the service today. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or UU Church West, we encourage you to send us an email at visitor@uucw.org. Checking out a new spiritual community is a courageous act, even in this time of virtual church services. So please reach out. We would love to connect with you. I'd like to introduce the wonderful team of people who have contributed to today's service. Jennifer Nicolosi, our lead music director. Dave Cicero, our director of Lifespan Religious Education, is with us this morning. Also, Kelly Bognar, our publications coordinator, who's working behind the scenes to manage the technology that makes our service possible. Our special pulpit guest today, a friend of UCW, is Philip Chard. Philip is a psychotherapist and author with a focus on lasting behavior change and adaptation to health challenges. Welcome, Philip. And now please join in singing hymn 1012, When I Am Frightened.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me, sing to me quietly? Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me, stand by me willingly? Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
Good morning. I now invite you to join in our opening reading, our chalice lighting reading, as we light our home chalices together. The words for this month are found in the order of service sent out earlier in the week. To be alive is to be hurt, and thus we all need healing. Healing another means easing their pain, spending time with their wounds, helping them move toward wholeness. Healing ourselves means honoring our pain, asking for help, and letting ourselves rest so that we too might move toward wholeness. We light this chalice for the gentle giving and receiving of healing. Have you ever done something you later regretted? Of course, we all have. When we do something terrible ourselves, we can, and maybe should, feel badly about it. But it's important to separate the act from the person. As some of us have been reminded during this month of exploring what it means to be a people of healing, it's important to remember that making mistakes is natural, but also that making a mistake does not mean that we are a mistake. Each of us is important, and each of us deserves the freedom to search for what is true and right in life. But what happens when someone witnesses a terrible act or event? The story I'm sharing today illustrates what this might look like. A Terrible Thing Happened by Margaret Holmes. Illustrated by Carrie Pillow and read with permission by Imagination Press. Sherman Smith saw the most terrible thing. He was very upset. It really scared Sherman to see such a terrible thing. Sherman did not like feeling so afraid. He did not want to remember what happened. So Sherman decided not to think about the terrible thing he saw. Sherman thought that would make him feel better. At first, the plan seemed to work. Sherman woke up every morning. He brushed his teeth and he went to school. Sherman played with his friends. He teased his sister and he walked his dog. Everything seemed all right for a while, but something inside of Sherman was starting to bother him. Sherman had to play more, run faster, and sing louder in order to forget the terrible thing he saw. Other things started happening to Sherman too. Sometimes he did not feel hungry. Sometimes his stomach hurt, or his head hurt. Sometimes he felt sad, but he did not know why. Sometimes he was nervous for no reason at all. Sometimes he did not sleep very well. Sometimes when he did sleep, he had very bad dreams. The bad dreams scared Sherman. Sherman started getting into trouble at school. Sometimes he felt so angry that he did mean things.
Ms. Maple helped Sherman think about his feelings. She listened while Sherman talked to her. They played while they talked. Sherman did not feel as mixed up when he talked to Ms. Maple. Once, when Sherman and Ms. Maple were coloring, she told him to draw a picture of how he felt when he was angry. This seemed like a strange thing to draw, but Sherman did it. After that, Sherman drew lots of pictures. Pictures of the pain in his stomach. Pictures of the bad dreams he had. Pictures of the fear he felt. And at last, pictures of the terrible thing he saw. Sherman and Miss Maple talked about the pictures. He asked if the terrible thing he saw was his fault. Sherman said he worried a lot about that. No, Miss Maple told him, it was not your fault. Sherman told Miss Maple a lot of things. He told her about the bad dreams. He told her how scared he felt. It was all very hard to do. Miss Maple was proud that Sherman was trying to talk about such hard things. Sherman found that it felt good to let his feelings out. Feeling good helped Sherman feel stronger. When Sherman felt stronger, he did not feel so angry. Nothing can change the terrible thing that Sherman saw, but now he does not feel so mean. He's not so scared or worried. His stomach does not hurt so much. And the bad dreams hardly ever happen. Sherman Smith is feeling much better now. He just thought you would want to know.
I wonder what it was that Sherman saw that was so terrible. I wonder if you might have seen something terrible that you've not yet had a chance to talk about. Who do you feel safe talking about it with? So Sherman's feeling better now. That's a good thing, right? But he wasn't at the start of our story. How are you feeling? If you're feeling not quite right about something you've seen or done, bringing it up with someone that you trust is a start on the path to healing the nervousness, the fear, the crankiness you might be experiencing as a result. Talking about the terrible things seemed to help Sherman understand that he was not the problem. Seeing the terrible thing did not make it his fault. In fact, it might not have even been his problem, but it certainly did affect him. I reminded us at the start of our principles affirming each person's inherent worth and our right to a free search for meaning in our own lives. May we consider our own experiences and our sense of those around us, especially young ones, to notice if we or they seem out of sorts. And if so, may we create an opportunity to share or express the memories and thoughts that may be preventing us from healing. An opportunity to at least begin that process.
And now please join me in singing our second hymn, hymn 1002, Comfort Me, by Mimi Bornstein-Doble. The words are in the order of service. Comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
I invite you now to be comfortable. Our meditation on hope and love in a time of struggle comes to us from the Reverend Alice Anacheka Naisman. In a world so filled with brokenness and sorrow, it would be easy to lose ourselves in never-ending grief, to be choked by our outrage, to be paralyzed by the enormity of suffering, to feel our hearts squeezed tight with hopelessness. Instead, this morning, let us simply breathe together as we hold our hearts open. Breathing in as our hearts fill with compassion. Breathing out as we pray for healing in our world and in our lives. Breathing in, opening ourselves to the transforming power of love. Breathing out as we pray for peace in our world and in our lives. Breathing in as we hold hope in our hearts. Breathing out as we pray for justice in our world and in our lives. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into the world. Breathing in, we are the prayer. Breathing out, we are the healing. Breathing in, we are the love. Breathing out, we are the peace. Breathing in, we are the hope. Breathing out, we are the justice. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Amen. Blessed be. May it ever be so.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us today. A young boy is repeatedly bullied for being different. A little girl witnesses their mother slowly succumbing to cancer. Week after week, a nurse struggles to comfort those who are alone and dying on a COVID ward. A soldier holds their mortally wounded comrade in arms, bleeding out on the battlefield. A teenager is ostracized by their social group and doesn't know why. I could go on in what often seems an endless litany of wounds and sorrows. Until recently, research into psychopathology placed far too little emphasis on recognizing, and treating emotional trauma. There existed an antiquated mindset suggesting that once a bad experience was over, one would recover, even if gradually. This notion implied that all people are more or less equally resilient in the face of traumatic experiences. This is the same perspective that spawned the idea of battle fatigue, a term suggesting that a stricken soldier is simply exhausted and with sufficient rest will bounce back to normal. We now realize that post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which is common among combat veterans, first responders, and more recently, frontline healthcare workers, can, if untreated, fuel lifelong impacts, undermining well-being or destroying lives altogether. This flawed perspective also gave rise to the oft-used adages, "What doesn't destroy you makes you stronger," and "Time heals all wounds." Responding to the latter, Rose Kennedy, the mother of John F. Kennedy, noted, "I do not agree. The wounds remain. In time, The mind, protecting its sanity, covers them with scar tissue. The pain may lessen, but it's never gone. Were that not the case, we would not be witnessing the perilous upward trajectory of trauma-induced dysfunction that is plaguing our population. The destructive impacts of unresolved emotional trauma and the number of persons, both children and adults, grappling with the aftershocks of this wounding are vastly underestimated. Today, we know that this affliction, in all its many guises, needs to be a central focus of psychological care. While professionals argue over what to call these wounds, uncomplicated PSD, comorbid PSD, complex PSD, unresolved childhood trauma, secondary traumatic stress, and the like, surveys suggest that up to 80% of persons seeking psychotherapy and related treatments have a history of trauma, often from childhood. They are suffering in body, mind, and spirit. Physically, the symptoms of emotional trauma include sleep disturbances, fatigue, chronic pain, headaches, and generalized inflammation in the body, itself a catalyst for many other ills. The tally of emotional and behavioral impacts is greater still, including disruptive anxiety, depression, anger and rage and agitation, interpersonal conflicts, emotional numbing, fears of going crazy, self-harming, substance abuse, and a host of others. In the spiritual realm, PTSD can generate shame, hopelessness, guilt, existential dread, and a loss of a higher purpose or connection with a greater good. The effects of these wounds commonly ripple out to damage relationships, spawning conflicts with others, job losses, family discord, and social isolation. When emotional trauma occurs to a child, the worst of these impacts may not emerge until early adulthood or even later, but emerge they will. Voluminous research shows rates of depression and anxiety and substance abuse, interpersonal dysfunction, and suicide are much greater in early life victims of abuse and traumatic experiences. Which brings us to one of the more vexing issues surrounding our societal perspective toward childhood trauma, a viewpoint undermining efforts to properly address its destructive impacts. In looking back at traumatic events from their childhoods, most adults minimize the extent and depth of the damage they have endured. Repeatedly, I hear clients in referencing their early life traumas, particularly bullying or social rejection, say things like, "It wasn't that big a deal," or "I got over it," or "We were just kids," and the like. Assessing the damage of childhood trauma by applying an adult perspective is patently inaccurate and frankly unfair. As children, we are without the benefit of adult perspective, so the emotional wounds we suffer can be far more profound and harmful than if they had occurred later in life. Now, we tend to regard emotional trauma as an individual experience. However, it also exists on a shared basis in social groupings, from families to workplaces to communities, and even society at large. Emotional contagion, as it is called, is very real. When trauma is experienced more broadly, such as from our pandemic, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, or the emotional paroxysms of the divisive, hate-saturated election that's still corroding our collective well-being, its impacts extend far beyond individuals. What's more, when our collective mindset undergoes emotional trauma, as individuals, we lose what comfort can be derived from recognizing that the world is okay, even if we are not. When someone who is emotionally wounded peers out at a world suffering a similar malady, it can feel like there is nowhere to turn. There is, and we shall soon examine what that is. Our collective wounding emerges in other data. The most recent World Happiness Report ending in 2019, so pre-pandemic, shows the United States ranks 18th worldwide in life satisfaction. Interestingly, those nations with higher rankings are largely what sociologists call we societies, as opposed to me societies, meaning their populations ascribe more importance to the common good rather than every person for themselves. Those nations with higher degrees of life satisfaction assigned greater value to social support, kindness, generosity, and fairness. Connecting this back with the effects of emotional trauma, when an afflicted individual lives in a society that is not collectively traumatized, they have a social and existential foundation to turn to for hope and solace. However, in a me society, such persons often feel on their own, grappling with their psychological demons in a relative isolation. Returning to the individual, how exactly does emotional trauma wreak its havoc? Many specialists in this field describe traumatic experiences as, quote, a branding iron on the brain, unquote. This metaphor contains a literal grain of truth. Happenings as far-ranging as childhood bullying to parental abuse, natural disasters to violent tragedies, with much else in between, can alter the structure and functioning of the brain and central nervous system. Just as other parts of the body sustain wounds caused by physical insult, injury, or disease, the brain can be damaged by the invisible cuts, if you will, inflicted by emotional trauma. But no longer as invisible as they might seem. Neuroscientists can quite literally image the wounds from prior trauma embodied in the morphology and operations of the brain. Like scar tissue from a physical wound, this hard wiring in one's neurology does not evaporate over time. Instead, not unlike a malignancy, it remains embedded in the brain where its corrosive impacts persist, sometimes even over a lifetime. Additionally, we know that susceptibility to emotional trauma varies across individuals. Those who are highly sensitive persons, or HSP, roughly about 20% of the adult population, have fewer psychological defenses, leaving them more vulnerable to this kind of wounding. For the most part, children, by nature of their developmental stage in life, are much more sensitive to emotional wounds than adults, rendering most of them highly sensitive people. In other words, susceptibility to emotional trauma is far greater in children and adolescents, although grown-ups who are highly sensitive can carry this heightened vulnerability as well. Finally, the spiritual wounding from emotional trauma is often overlooked. In our zeal to diminish the psychological symptoms of PTSD, we too often ignore its impacts on the afflicted individual's sense of meaning, purpose, and connection with life itself. If you will, mentally re-inhabit for a time your mindset when you were a young child. As we gradually awaken to life and ourselves within it, most of us are open and therefore vulnerable. Our brains are wired to learn, to connect socially with others, to explore, to mentally incarnate, if you will, into this world. If, during this period of openness, the world, whether through persons or other vectors, inflicts a traumatic wound on oneself, then one's perspective toward and relationship with existence can be fundamentally altered, and not in a good way. When that happens, the world is no longer perceived as emotionally safe. Instead, it becomes populated with dangers, both seen and imagined. Like a child errantly placing its hand on a hot stovetop, what developmental psychologists call one-trial learning occurs. The brain is imprinted with this risk aversion, altering one's essential relationship with the world and often with others who inhabit it. An emotional wound becomes an existential one, precipitating a deep, underlying wariness about life and living. As adults, we often repress this dread, but out of sight is not out of mind. Deep within the subcortical brain, this anger persists, this angst, persists, surreptitiously influencing mindset, mood, and behaviors. For instance, dive deeper into the psyche and soul of a cynical, angry adult, and you will often find a wounded child who is frightened and bitter toward existence itself. Thankfully, with most individuals, emotional trauma can be treated. While mental health types have a long way to go in this regard, in the past 2 decades, better forms of care have emerged. Some of these healing approaches fall under the umbrella of self-care, while others require the assistance of a properly trained therapist, minister, or physician. One promising area includes newer so-called brain-based therapies, which you may have heard of some, such as EMDR and brain spotting and active memory release. Unlike talk therapy, these approaches seek to activate the afflicted individual's emotional trauma in a controlled manner that catalyzes the brain's innate capacity to heal. Just as the rest of the body marshals its resources to salve an injury, the brain possesses its own self-repairing capacity. These therapies, these brain-based ones, when successful, draw on the brain's neuroplasticity to rewire neural networks that hold the embedded trauma. How much do these brain-based therapies differ from talk therapy? Well, on occasion, the therapist does not even need to know the specific nature of the client's traumatic event in order to initiate the healing process. Another recent and promising method is something called psychedelic therapy. Before you start thinking of the 60s, listen on. Again, in a controlled environment with a trained therapist, the client ingests a medicinal dose of psilocybin, mescaline, or LSD, all potent hallucinogenic substances. Research into this approach, both from Europe and clinical trials now undergoing in the United States, shows very promising results for addressing PTSD, along with other mood-related disorders. In many cases, a single administration is sufficient to bring about lasting improvement. I'm not suggesting there's no place for traditional talk therapy in treating unresolved emotional trauma. Even with brain-based and psychedelic therapies, among others, a vital prerequisite for success requires developing a strong empathic connection and rapport between therapist or helper and the client. Without this, the techniques themselves often prove insufficient. What's more, talk therapy helps afflicted persons gain perspective on their situation to better understand the nature and impact of trauma and prepare for more neurologically grounded approaches. In the realm of self-care, there are methods that, while more passive in style, also show considerable promise. Nature therapy is a powerful example. An explosion of research over the past 15 years has demonstrated the remarkable capacity of nature immersion to help heal the spiritual aspects of emotional trauma. I'm not talking about walking through the woods just to get in one's daily steps or with earbuds blasting into one's brain. Nature immersion, which is sometimes called forest bathing, involves placing oneself in a natural environment and then remaining there for a time, tuning one's senses into the sights, sounds, scents, and touches of that place. Not only does this diminish anxiety and reduce stress and uplift mood, but it also provides existential reassurance, a timeless sense of it's okay. Also, there are programs in which nature therapists accompany clients on wilderness quests, sometimes simultaneously using neuro-based therapies like brain spotting to amplify the healing impact. The power of nature to heal spiritual wounds from trauma is best said perhaps by Rachel Carson, author of Silent Spring, who reminded us, quote, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts." There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. Meditation, prayer, and other contemplative practices also appear to support this kind of healing, even if not always occupying the central role. Excuse me. However, the focus of one's practice in this regard does matter. Contemplative work that nurtures forgiveness and self-compassion generates a healing influence. The question of whether to forgive the people who caused one's wounding is best addressed later in the healing process. Yet, it represents an important spiritual challenge that ultimately must be addressed. As one person struggling with this put it, quote, "You need to accept the apology of those who wounded you, even if they never offered it." And as theologian Louis Medes reminded us, quote, "To forgive is to set a person free and to discover the prisoner was you." Love, compassion for others and oneself, and forgiveness. These are the spiritual tonics that salve traumatic wounds. Again, often, one must pursue other healing paths first, laying a foundation that makes the power of love possible. Sometimes, unconditional love and acceptance from another human being provides the final remedy for the deeply wounded soul. While not available to all, when present, the healing power of love is the most potent of all therapeutics. In closing, a cinematic yet true illustration of this power emerges in the film a beautiful day in the neighborhood. In this cinema, a cynical, bitter journalist, wounded by emotional trauma from his youth, encounters the unconditional acceptance from someone that we often felt it from ourselves as children, Mr. Rogers. And when these two encounter each other, and when Mr. Roger brings that unconditional love and acceptance, the healing begins. Not as a result of some technique, valuable as these can prove to be, but from the presence of a forgiving, compassionate connection with another human being. Our world is wounded, as are we within it. Yet each of us must first heal ourselves and then do our best to reach out and help heal others. Thank you.
UUCW's Split the Plate program is one of outreach and generosity. Each month, we give half of all undesignated offerings to a local nonprofit organization to help us live out our Unitarian Universalist values and serve our community. Healing Hearts of Waukesha County supports grieving children and their families. Healing Hearts offers free peer support programs for children and the significant adults in their lives who are dealing with loss due to death, divorce, substance abuse, abandonment, incarceration, deportation, and other life-altering events. Since 2010, it has helped more than 900 participants representing over 350 families. This wonderfully valuable organization delivers validation, support, joy, and hope to an overlooked group in our community, our grieving children. To support Healing Hearts anytime this month, go to the UUCW website's Donate tab and select Split the Plate from the menu provided. Or you can text or mail your donation today using the information found here. Today, I thank you for your generosity to Healing Hearts of Waukesha County.
Our closing words for today are from the Reverend Cynthia Landrum. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection. Our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.